الحمد لله. All right, everybody. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, today, inshallah, we're going to be continuing. Remember the whole set of slides that we were doing before, and which basically involved how to make our houses as homes. So, let's go over it really quick on what were the topics that we covered. We started out in talking about the relationship and what that looks like. Is it based off romance? Is it based on love, companionship, and what actually makes that bond together? So what's really that cement that puts these pieces together? And we talked about things like commitment that brings in longevity. We talked about the different descriptions, male descriptions, female descriptions that the Prophet ﷺ recommended to be within the relationship to make that as a bond that is based on commitment, bringing in love and romance, and definitely bring in that successful relationship right there. We also talked about from this ayah, خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. Then we went into another type of, I guess, transition. And we said, okay, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's object in the relationship is to make this relationship have sukoon, which is, we said, tranquility. It means stability. It basically means we're not seeing drama, we're not seeing tension, we're not seeing anything but peace. So we talked about the different things that would basically bring in the peace and the relationship. And we said, well, it starts out with understanding priorities. And we also use the example of a beam of light and the different primary colors that would basically come out of that beam of light. And we said, well, that's basically to tell us that what makes that beam of light is basically consistent of all these primary colors, and therefore the opposite thing is right. If you were to have all these primary colors, you can basically blend them together and you can come out with a beam of light, or at least you're going to come out with white. Okay. And same thing we said when we're talking about Sharia, we're basically talking about a set of different primary legal maxims, and these primary legal maxims would be the preservation of deen, preservation of nafs, preservation of ird, preservation of aql, and we went in details with how we would consider and see through these priorities and through these primary sets in the deen, how we would see our responsibility in our relationship with the husband, our relationship with the children, and our relationship with the house. And then we went in details using the primary key things in Islam, and we said deen, nafs, aql, mal. So the first thing that I want to see in my husband is basically his deen, and we talked about this relationship and what that looks like. And number two, the nafs and the aql and the kind of blended these pieces together, and we said basically within and through the lens of a hadith how we can fuse these areas together to basically understand our priorities. And then we went into talking about the rest of what this ayah entails right there. And we said, جَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. So then we said, okay, well, if it's supposed to bring about mawadda and rahmah, what are the other pieces that basically want these things fused together, and what will bring those? So we took another ayah and we said فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ, and we basically took the ayah that tells me the key things to lead us to second. So it wants piety, it wants qunut, it wants a set of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and a type of commitment. So we then went into details with that, and we said حافظات للغيب بما حفظ الله, that they would be preserving their homes, and basically we're speaking about not only preserving their homes, but preserving themselves, preserving the wealth, preserving different things. So we went in details with how to actually guard that. We went in a number of different problems that we had basically faced and basically, seen as an example and to learn from. And we also went into mawadda and rahma, and that took us to the other slide. Well, how do we bring in that mawadda? So we talked about the Prophet ﷺ and telling us, well, certainly a good man being being that person to, I guess, bring within you and trigger a happy wife makes a happy life. Definitely that is one tip that the Prophet ﷺ had given. And he said, خِيَارُكُمْ خِيَارُكُمْ لِنِسَائِهِمْ. The best of you to their wives is basically the best in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the same time, he also said, well, ladies, you can do some of your homework as well, because it's basically bringing in both pieces together. And basically, the one on the left, we're telling them to move right, and the one on the right, we're telling them to move left. That way we can bring in this pair to basically getting closer to one another. So we gave some tips on how to basically influence the heart, how to influence the sight, how to speak in an art of making a good dialogue, and we talked about the art of listening, and we also talked about some of the things, not entirely, but some of the things that basically relates to intimacy and some of that art as well. But there's a lot more that we're going to talk about one day, not now at least. Rahma, we talked about mercy and what that means in the relationship. And then we went into, well, okay, since we've got the other responsibility is our own deen and basically preserving that. Now the children, they become part of all of this. They become part, in fact, they are coming out of all this combination, and all of the sudden the children, they're right there in front of us. How do we get them into basically living this bond that we tried to start out from the very beginning, and now they basically have a combination that is not necessarily from the very start coming in with their full intention, with their full state of mind to really fully understand that, yes, I'm with you to the end. They come in and say, wait a minute, when did this start, and how did it start, and where am I? So that's when, of course, the Prophet ﷺ was giving us key tips, and we looked at the story when the Prophet ﷺ had mentored basically these young Sahaba that came to the Prophet ﷺ, and we took it from this hadith. So we went into this hadith: ارجعوا إلى أهليكم فأقيموا فيهم وعلموهم ومروهم فإذا حضرت الصلاة فليؤذن لكم أحدكم. We took it from this hadith that is narrated by Muslim, and we then set a number of different lessons to learn from this hadith on how we can make a good foundation within our kids and how we can grow in that home to be based on the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, based on this foundation that it's heading to Jannah. So then we looked into a number of different, again, the primary things in Islam. Again, here we go. We looked at the deen, the nafs, the aql, the ird, the mal, and basically letting us know that those are the primary things to start teaching your children about deen, start teaching them and being and preserving their health, whether we're speaking about, muscle mass, or whether we're talking about the body function, or whether we're talking about cognitive skills, and whether we're talking about halal resources, all these different areas. And certainly then we go into preserving the chastity, and certainly what that means in the relationship, in teaching the kids modesty, the manners of entering homes, dealing with the opposite sex, and therefore taking us to, well, what brings in a lot of these things is basically money, how to make halal resources, and certainly doing the right money management. And then we went into speaking about the money management. We talked about the darurat, We talked about الحاجيات, and we talked about the tahsinat. We said the darurat are basically the necessities. We talked about the necessities and what that means. We also talked about al-hajiyat, which basically can differ from time to another, basically eases your life. So we're talking about perhaps maybe, hey, we agree on certain hajiyat, or things like refrigerator, things like stove. Is that a key thing? And can we get, something that is probably cheaper brand than perhaps maybe something that lives longer, because maybe their situation is different. So now we go into setting that money management. And finally, number three is basically tahsinat. Those are basically the wants. Okay, so the wants compared to the needs, and we talked about that in detail. We also talked about maintaining homes, even though I didn't have the slide for it, but I did talk about the home, and we basically went into speaking about the home and its hygiene, in its tahara, because that relates to its deen. We talked about the art of maintenance and how important that was in maintaining everything, and teaching the kids themselves to get involved with maintaining the home. And we talked about teaching the children how to recognize territories. There's a certain territory that belongs to mom and dad, certain territory belongs to our sister, certain territory of how to knock on the doors, certain territories that basically involve the art of money management. You're wasting food by throwing it. You're wasting food by perhaps maybe just putting too much of that food. And perhaps we need to learn how to teach the children how to get involved and feel that this responsibility, that, hey, we have to live on a budget, even if we have all the money, even if you're a millionaire. Teaching your children how to live on a budget is basically teaching them how to make money. This is extremely important to remember, because to teach the children to live on a budget, remember, a penny saved is a penny earned. You're teaching them how to earn money. You're teaching them how to basically preserve that money in a way where you're letting them learn the art of sabr, the art of deprivation, the art of self-control. Because if they don't learn the art of self-control, then they will be the ones to perhaps maybe steal whenever possible. They would be the ones to think of trespassing other people's boundaries whenever they have the opportunity to do so. And then it becomes, oh, are you really raising a person of principle? Or are you raising a person that feels that when I want something, I need to get it? And that's a very big problem. Okay, speaking of when I want something, I need to get it, that actually takes us to masculinity and femininehood. I mean, it doesn't mean that a woman, every time she wants something, she needs to get it, but of course, the question is, if you say men and women are different, or are they not different? Do we raise them the same way? Are they different? Are they not different? How do we understand the relationship, at least in the foundation? But I don't want your opinion, Aisha was. I want the Quran. I want the Quran. I want an objective answer, not a subjective answer. Fair enough. That's exactly what we're going to do. And we're going to see the Quran and how it basically set these descriptions, or set these boundaries, or at least set these differences between the two. Are there any differences? Well, if you look at the Quran, it basically had considered that binary laws are in nature, not only in human beings, but it's basically an important thing that is in nature as a law. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically told us right there, فاطر السماوات والأرض جعل لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا ومن الأنعام أزواجا, that He had created the heavens and the earth, and He created a certain law on earth, which is created from your own selves. The binary laws, and these binary laws of male, female, is not only in human beings, but it's as well in al-an'am. Now, al-an'am, does that mean all animals, or is this talking about at least speaking about certain mammals? Definitely it's talking about certain mammals, but because that's what al-an'am is, and he didn't say min al-haywanat or min al-kainat or, from the different creatures. But I guess, I'm not a zoologist to go in details with that one, but يَذْرَأُكُمْ فِيهِ. But of course, the ayah is indicating the binary laws are part of the laws that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put within nature. And He said, يَذْرَأُكُمْ فِيهِ. He created you basically to use these resources on earth. يَذْرَأُكُمْ. He created you, and that's where you're basically going to use your credentials to reach a certain potential. And that's that idhar. Idhar is when you basically see these little tiny particles. You see these little tiny particles? These tiny particles, they're dhar. Now, yadra'ukum, you're put as tiny particles, but not these tiny particles to necessarily not for a function, but for a specific function. And what is that function? Well, that function is to do three things. Number one is basically وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونِ. كمان مرة. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two, created us وَإِذْ قَالَ رَبُّكَ لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي جَاعِلٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ خَلِيفَةً. Created us to be the Khalifa, to take over basically that responsibility, to live up to it, to use our resources that we were given to basically live up to that one. And certainly, based on that as well, when we say Khalifa, then we go in certain details. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling us, well, don't use these binary laws and apply it on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there's nothing like unto the Lord Almighty. Therefore, the Lord Almighty is the only one that is non-binary. وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. He is basically the all-hearing, all-seeing, in other words, letting us know that يَذْرَأُكُمْ فِيهِ, that He's capable of going beyond and being able to hear and being able to see what type of commitment you would basically practice. And of course, well, He's not only talking about the creation, but He's also talking about لَهُ مَقَالِدُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. He also controls the function of the heavens and the earth and the different things that function there. But just know, يَبْسُطُ الرِّزْقَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ وَيَقْدِرُ. That's the key, one of the key things, that He basically would give the amount of provisions in a set or in a specific amount that He would determine whether this amount is right for this function or not. And therefore, إِنَّهُ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. For He is the one that is all-knowing, and therefore letting us recognize that there are certain provisions that might have been given to you as basically a pair and given to the husband or the male, that pair, and this amount, they definitely vary, but it is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wisdom. So letting us know that one, and letting us know, well, شَرَعَ لَكُم مِّنَ الدِّينِ مَا وَصَّى بِهِ نُوحًا. Now letting us know that you've got a foundation, you've got a principle, whatever your credentials or whatever your capacity was, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting you know that certainly there's a khilafah that I want you to set as a potential, but you've got these capacities that you have to recognize should be going within a specific route, within a specific channel, and that's what the word Sharia means. The word Sharia means a spring of water. The word Sharia means a channel, basically a stream. That's what Sharia is. It's a stream, it's a channel, it's a spring. And therefore, this Shara'a and this stream dates back all the way from Prophet Nuh to Prophet Ibrahim, to Prophet Musa, to Prophet Isa. In other words, it was always that channel that was created and basically revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and revealed throughout history for mankind to live up to that potential. What potential? An aqimuddin, to basically set and live the bond of deen, the bond of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَا تَتَفَرَّقُوا فِيهِ. لا تتفرقوا فيه. You do not separate away from it. You basically live it wholeheartedly. كَبُرَ عَلَى الْمُشْرِكِينَ مَا تَدْعُوهُمْ إِلَيْهِ. And definitely, you're going to see that resistance from al-mushrikeen, or from those that definitely want to oppose living the principle. So just remember, الله يجتبي إليه من يشاء. The Lord Almighty will select whomever He wants, but this is a selection. Do you choose to be selected or not? So in order to be selected, you put yourself in the best, basically, CV, and the best presentation, and you give yourself the best appearance, etc. That's basically to qualify for what? To qualify for Jannah. So then you have to basically put yourself in the best shape, in the best presentation to qualify to be selected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to basically get to وَيَهْدِي إِلَيْهِ مَن يُنِيبُ. If you basically follow the guidance, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you guidance that you will follow, that will give you guidance. You select the path of guidance, then you will find guidance. But if you don't select the path of guidance, guidance is not going to be sent on to you specifically. You take the path of guidance, you put in basically that commitment, and you will see the road opening and basically helping you find the path to Jannah. And certainly now we recognize the binary laws and basically the different paths right there, and the different potentials and the different capacities, and basically all the different things that we were created for, whether it's for Tawheed or whether we're supposed to be Aqimuddin, laying out the Sharia and living based on Sharia. That's basically the commitment of both the male and female, and the only one that is not binary is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the non-binary. Okay, now continuing with that idea, with that foundation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that the current battle of men and women is not battling themselves. In other words, we're not battling the men out there, and definitely the premise of feminism falls right from this premise right there, and just from this foundation, that there's no battle between men and women, but they were supposed to be لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. It was supposed to be a place of tranquility. It was supposed to be a place of love. It was supposed to be a place of mercy, and not a place where we would doubt each other's intention, because the second we doubt each other's intention, that's when we basically start, let's say, sparking. I know spark has a good connotation, but at least igniting, let's use that word, igniting the burning fire right there in that relationship between the two. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was letting us know that the current battle between basically on earth is not between men and women, but is actually battling shaitan. Okay, but what would he use? How does he battle us that way? Where's that battle? So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically let us know. Allahu الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وما بينهما في ستة أيام. That one we memorized when we were kids, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heavens and the earth and what is in between them in 6 days, and then sat on the throne, or basically stawa ala al-arsh, and was on the throne. And yet we do not have any one to intercede, anyone to basically give us the support, but the Lord Almighty. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let us know that there's that key one right there. الذي أحسن كل شيء خلقه وبدأ خلق الإنسان من طين. He created everything in a complete creation. In other words, you as a female, you're not incomplete, and neither is he as a male incomplete. You're both complete to basically do a certain practice, a certain capacity to basically to complete one task that you were asked to basically present. That's male and female. Well, wait a minute. Isn't that hadith that the marriage is half yourself? Sorry, but that hadith is not authentic. Oh, I know, I know. It's kind of like popping a balloon that you're so happy about. At least I know something. But no, it's not an authentic hadith. But yeah, I know that we're so happy about it and we put it on our wedding cards and all of that stuff. Can I put it on my wedding card? You sure can. That, completing your half, that's okay. You can do that. But I'm just letting you know. Okay, let's see. الذي أحسن كل شيء خلقه. He created everything in basically in its perfection. In other words, it doesn't mean that you are perfect and he is perfect, but it basically perfect to basically what you are going to be asked to present. So in other words, you have the capacity, you have the tools to present a certain I guess a goal, a certain presentation, a certain limit that basically you were created for. So you're perfect for what you were created for. And he is perfect for what he was created for. Okay. And both of you, خلق الإنسان من طين. Both of you were created from the same nature, من طين, basically, from clay, and therefore no man, because that was a whole debate in different areas, whether on China, in India, in the pagan Arab, in basically the West. They were discussing whether women were created of Satan's nature, whether they were created from an animal nature, or what nature are they? They considered that women are wicked by nature, and therefore their life is not equal to male life, and not in its honor, and certainly not its incapacity. So therefore it would not be equal in any way. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us know, خلق الإنسان من طين. You're both created from the same nature, and certainly, therefore, you cannot consider one group of people, whether you are white or whether you are black or whether you are Asian or whatever it is, that your nature somehow is smarter, somehow deserves to be superior or is superior in nature. And basically, you could say a lot of these wars in the world basically came from the whole evolution theory, basically considering that people are, the whiter you are, the more advanced, and basically you went through a more evolution than the darker you are. The darker you are, you basically were more primitive and definitely on the scale of the other side of the white man, who basically was more intelligent according to the evolution theory, stronger, more beautiful. All the good qualities are in them because it is the survival of the fittest. They are the fittest, and you are basically being dark and being brown. And the more brown you are, you're basically closer to the first primary evolution, which is an ape. Well, definitely, Islam does not see that whatsoever. Islam considers that this whole foundation is nothing but a kafir foundation. Well, then, of course, from the evolution to atheism, from atheism to basically, of course, survival of the fittest. Hey, you go and steal Africa's resources, you go and steal each other's resources. It's okay because, anyways, there's no objective morality, there's no objective truth. So, therefore, there's only one thing that makes you when it's basically when you see your own truth as that truth, and therefore let's take that subjective truth. But in Islam, of course, tells you, no, 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 we gotta stop right there, because خلق الإنسان من طين. All of you were created from طين. And then جعل نسله من سلالة من ماء مهين, and made his offspring, his reproduction basically, from a sulala, from a certain trace. So we're talking about sulala, we're talking about, what are we talking about? DNA? Are we talking about genes? Are we talking about a trace? Certainly, this actually combines everything that we had mentioned, min ma'in mahin. It basically is from water or a substance, basically, that is mahin. You may not say it of anything that is important, but it actually contains all the different elements. You know, the other day I was watching this doctor that was saying that there are 60 different descriptions, 60,000, sorry, 60,000 different descriptions that we can actually find just in one sperm. So based on one sperm, not only can they tell between a male sperm and a female sperm, just that sperm, but it actually carries over 60,000 different genes that basically are within this little tiny creature right there, and 60,000 things. So it carries all this information that you totally are blank about. It basically carries all that sulala, all these different traces. And the word sulala actually means kind of like a chain, by the way, because a silsila is a chain. So when you talk about sulala, you're talking about one tiny piece of chain and another tiny piece of chain and a tiny piece, and that they're basically all connected. What a word that when you look at the DNA and they tell you what it looks like, kind of this like a coil thing, that's that sulala. Ya Allah, ashhadu bi anna Muhammadan Nabi. There you go. It's right there. ثم سواه ونفخ فيه من روحه. Then he created him basically in a certain shape and then given him from his soul. How does that look like? This is ghaib, but at the end, جعل لكم السمع والأبصار, created the hearing, and that's why hearing is one of the key things to learning, to communication. Before you start talking, learn how to listen first. جعل لكم السمع والأبصار, made you and gave you السمع والأبصار, the hearing and the seeing, and والأفئدة. الفؤاد is basically whether it's the cognitive skills, the brain, or whether it's the heart. But according to the Quran, the heart not only it's not only the brain that has the cognitive skills, but according to the Quran, the heart also has a number of different neurons that also relate to cognitive skills. According to the Quran, I'm not sure science and where they got to, but I would say Quran precedes that. In here, let me just say another thing. Yesterday I was reading a very interesting book. It was by Susan Haynes, I think her last name was, but she was actually talking about scientism. And in that book, it's quite interesting how she lays that out. And she says that, in the age of postmodernism, in the age of modernism, we were always told that science is superior to everything. And we weren't told of the flaws that science basically carries within it, and not everything that we know in science is necessarily true, and that science in itself is not always objective, and that a lot of the different things that we see in science are actually subjective. Now, this is extremely important because a lot of what we are told that, hey, this is what science says, we are not told that there are certain ideologies that are behind some of what is presented as science. Okay, that what is presented as science can sometimes be infiltrated or can sometimes be backed up by certain ideologies that wanted you to basically live a certain culture. And then we are told and presented that psychology, that it is basically that psychology, things like human or sociology, or probably a number of different studies that they're presented to us as if they're really hard science, or they're based on objective studies, when the truth of the matter, they contain a lot of pseudoscience. And this is extremely important. They considered that certain things are pseudoscience, and part of what they considered as pseudoscience is basically different religious studies. And unfortunately, that's part of my PhD. A lot of the Muslims that grow up in Western cultures, they basically live with that mindset. They basically grow to seeing that culture, that religion is a pseudoscience, and then they would treat Islam as a pseudoscience and would expect that Islam is supposed to succumb to the therapist and what she's saying, the psychologist and what she's saying, because they were indoctrinated to believe that those things are actually objective, that those things cannot be challenged, and that's what studies say, and therefore superior to Islam, superior to basically all the other sciences out there. And I want you to keep that one in mind, including Islam, including fiqh, etc. It's quite interesting how she presented it. So I want you to just keep that one in mind, that we many times think that, oh yeah, if I see something different in the Quran, well, wait a minute, whoever said that science and what science is presenting to us in various studies is necessarily objective? There are certain things. One, it is not infallible. Two, it is not necessarily everything is hard science, or everything is basically, the final statement. A lot of it is still lacking data to see in further into understanding the world. So therefore, seeing Allahu Akbar and seeing that Quran is superior to all, that's to help you recognize the true definition of ma'rifah, the true definition of knowledge, the true definition of what actually acts as the lens that you would see and read the world in. So he said right there, letting us know that you've got some cognitive key things in your heart and in your brain, and they basically certainly work together, but these things are the key things to helping you know. So we're talking about the key resources to helping you learn about the world. Number one is your hearing, number two is your seeing, and number three is your brain and heart. قليلا ما تشكرون. Very few people would be thankful. And what is that telling us? That certainly you've got these resources, but another resource to helping you be mentally fit is to be thankful, is to be a person that recognizes the different things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you. Not until then will you really be a person that is, one, healthy in the resources that you were given, and two, healthy mentally. In other words, to be healthy mentally, the premise in the foundation is to learn how to set out the different blessings, the different powers, the different capacities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed you with. Not until then are you going to be capable of using these resources to basically live up to a certain potential. That's why Islam tells you want to be mentally fit. I want you to say, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. I want you to start with that foundation, that you recognize all the praise that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given you, that it's actually there. You don't need to count it, but it is more than the trauma, more than the hardship, more than the challenge. that you probably would be as part of your nature. Just see that trauma, we are more likely to remember a trauma than actually remember a good thing. We're more likely to remember trauma than remember happiness. We're more likely to remember pain than remember gain. We're more likely to remember perhaps the things that we lost and the things that we had kept. Right? And this is key. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting you know, I want you to create a mindset which basically is there. You are capable of doing it, but you just need to connect these wires, strengthen these wires in how you would make yourself see and recognize the capacities that you were given in order to let it beam towards a potential. So that's why, what potential is that? Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the potential to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as being the most merciful, most beneficent, and the potential to Maliki Yawmiddin, to live up to that potential that you are aiming at the day of judgment, to giving you basically that place of success, Jannah. مالك يوم الدين. How do I live it? إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. You basically submit to the Lord Almighty, male and female. إياك نعبد. We would worship you. We would إياك نستعين, and we would seek any support from you, and we would seek the help from you, even those moments when we may fail, when we may probably live a certain challenge. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. So guide us to the right path. The path of those that you guided, and not the path of those that were deviant or those that you were not content over. Okay, so now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically lets us know, well, now that you understand that Fatiha, that opening in your relationship, and of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَلَأُضِلَّنَّهُمْ وَلَأُمَنِّيَنَّهُمْ وَلَآمُرَنَّهُمْ فَلْيُبَتِّكُنَّ أَذَانَ الْأَنْعَامِ وَلَآمُرَنَّهُمْ فَلَيُغَيِّرُنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ وَمَنْ يَتَّخِذِ الشَّيْطَانَ وَلِيًّا مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ فَقَدْ خَسِرَ خُسْرَانًا مُبِينًا يَعِدُهُمْ وَيُمَنِّيهِمْ وَمَا يَعِدُهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ إِلَّا غُرُورًا. Okay, the key thing, and this is what we're living today, basically. What we're living today is this type of trying to change our creation, and unfortunately, we would see this type of let's call it the provoking us into giving up on certain things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in us with basically all this LGBT and all of that, and certainly this big ideology that was at one point basically coming in our society and forcing us to the international level that you have to adopt the LGBT and all of that. So let's see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us know that Iblis will وَلَأُضِلَّنَّهُمْ, and I will misguide them, and I will let them live in certain hopes, even though they don't actually exist, but he'll basically make you live with a certain hope, with something that is not within your scope, basically. Hope not within your scope. Islam was telling you, or Sharia was telling you, I'm going to give you hope, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, by you recognizing your scope. Shaitan is letting us live the other way, letting us live in hope that is not within our scope. And then what does he do? لَأَمُرَنَّهُمْ. So he'll order us to basically change the creation, whether in changing the ears of the al-an'am, or of course what that was basically a certain act. That was a certain ritual that the people in the Arabian Peninsula used to do. They would cut the ears, and literally cut, at least the earlobes of the animals, and they would say, well, these are set for men, and these are set for women, these are set for for ritual. This is not set for ritual. And in other words, they had their certain ways of basically deforming these animals, but they considered that that was a way to set boundaries and how we would limit these resources, whether to men, to women, to the gods, etc. So then, of course, that was living their shirk. And this is the key one today. وَلَآمُرَنَّهُمْ فَلَا يُغَيِّرُنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ. And I will order them to change the creation of Allah Almighty. What does it mean to change the creation? Is it really changing the creation like in what? Well, it's changing the creation in a number of different ways. Number one, in you living as, well, you were biologically female, therefore psychologically you are female, therefore to the bone, to the DNA, you are female. Do your DNA, you're female. Even if they were to find, I don't know, a 50,000-year-old bone, they're going to be capable of going to the DNA of it, and they're going to know whether it was a male or a female. They're capable of doing that just by to the bone. Same thing. You're talking about your bone structure, your skeleton, everything is basically designed in a certain way, and therefore changing the creation and changing it on the outside does not change the fact that deep on the inside, from your pelvic structure to basically the bones in the rib area to the brain and the skull and the jaw and all of that, and even your legs and the femur and all of that, it's basically designed in a certain way that's completely different. So to somehow think that, yeah, let me cut, for example, cut this or that in the reproductive system, that doesn't change the fact of what you really can carry and what you really are. It doesn't change the fact by making a mastectomy that you are female. Just by changing it and thinking that, yeah, what if I would inject hormones, etc. Just by injecting these hormones, certainly you can change certain things, but it doesn't change the truth of the matter that your whole structure was actually female or male. Now, therefore, فَلْيُغَيِّرُنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ was a key thing that Shaitan was basically letting us, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was letting us know that Shaitan was going to use this as a way to change ourselves, to change our creation, to change what we really were created for. In other words, in order to create what we were created for, he will basically confuse you about what you are and who you are, and confuse you about your own identity from the very foundation of it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَن يَتَّخِذِ الشَّيْطَانَ وَلِيًّا مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَقَدْ خَسِرَ خُسْرَانًا مُبِينًا. Whoever takes the shaitan as their place of guidance, as their support, as their place of hope, then certainly they had lost a manifest loss. Wait a minute. So why did it say a manifest? Like, why is it so apparent? Why is it so clear? It's so clear because if they were to get off their own creation and not recognize their capacity, then what they really had lost is they lost their capacity. If they got off what they were given, in other words, you as a female, that's a capacity. That as a male, that's his capacity. Not recognizing the bounties and the capacity, don't try living as a male, and it's not up to a male, because a male is not necessarily superior. But you live as a female, and he lives as a male. And therefore, there's no race, and it's not at all based on the feminist premise. The feminist premise regards that, hey, the male is superior because he is the fittest, and you are basically inferior, so let's change that. And they'll basically, that's the premise that it's founded on. Although, you would think that someone like Simone de Beauvoir, who's considered as the godfather, well, the godmother, she would hate to say godfather, but the godmother of feminism. But guess what? She was actually very misogynist. She was very misogynist. There are great studies that actually expose her misogyny and considered that, hey, we women are generally inferior, women are not living up to that. But it's still, she considered that women, in order to grant your superiority and get to your better place and basically become at a higher level, what you need to do is basically embrace the social dynamic of men, the social dynamic of male. And just as men would basically live on the outside, you go outside. If we change your social dynamic, we change your social, your social, let's say, your social practice and what you do socially, that can actually then change who you are. So then, hey, then your economy changes, then your social status and your social definition would change, and then you could but then present yourself that you are equal, that there's no difference. And that's a shaitani. That's where they came in with that gender. It started out with a definition that they made and introduced a new definition. It wasn't Simone de Beauvoir that introduced the word gender. I know that one. Okay. Just to let you know. Okay. But what the word gender basically means is that your biological creation is not necessarily always needing to be the same as your social your social dynamic, or what socially you would be doing, as in a role in what you would present within that area. And when you look at that, that's part of فَلْيُغَيِّرُنَّ خَلْقَ اللَّهِ. It's to change your creation from what you really are best at, which is motherhood, which is to bring in this contribution to the society, which the key thing is how to be a mother, how to create a society that is, one, healthy, that is fit, that is at its best in potential. That doesn't mean that it contradicts for you to get an education. No, get an education. That doesn't contradict, because the Prophet ﷺ had basically said that seeking ilm is a farida upon every Muslim. And the word Muslim is a comprehensive word to basically mean men and women. The hadith that says Muslim or Muslima is actually not authentic, but just the word Muslim, that is authentic. Okay, so طلب العلم فريضة على كل Muslim, upon every Muslim, and that would mean men and women, and not necessarily exclusive to one sex. Okay, so وَمَن يَتَّخِذِ الشَّيْطَانَ وَلِيًّا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ فَقَدْ خَسِرَ خُسْرًا مُبِينًا, to let us know that you would be the person and the one at loss if you did not embrace your full potential, if you did not embrace your full capacity. So superiority is not based on race, not based on sex, not based on blood, not based on kind, but based on living the principles of the Lord Almighty. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَىٰ. Oh, people, basically talking to all mankind, we had created you from male and female and made you into different nations, tribes, in order for you to get to know, basically to learn from one another, and basically live up to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created you for. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The best of you are basically the ones to be living up to the principles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna Allah alimun khabir. For the Lord Almighty is all-knowing and khabir. What does the word khabir let me know? Well, the word khabir lets me know that the different potentials, not only is it male and female, but certainly we may have certain features that are more common in certain tribes, more common in certain nations, and more common in this. Certainly, are there certain things that we could say maybe the Indians are better at math? Or maybe, let's say, Somalis are better at, I don't know, understanding perhaps certain things in I don't know, medicine, for example. Okay, or perhaps maybe certain key things in probably learning maybe different body buildup. Africans, or at least certain groups or certain tribes, are better fit, and we know that there are certain tribes, African tribes, that their average height for men is 6'7". Average height for women is 6'3". Is height women? This is a whole tribe, okay, in southern Sudan, a whole tribe. Basically, their height is height that would basically make all of us nothing but dwarfs to them. Okay, is height necessarily a plus? Is it? Or is intelligence the only thing? What actually makes a good feature? What are these good features? So at the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, well, whatever the feature was, that really is not what matters, but certainly there are variants. There are variants from one tribe, from one group of people, that they are probably, this one is known for their generosity. Yemenis are known for their wisdom. That group is known for their for certain features of probably intelligence, maybe mathematics, maybe certain types of intelligence that other areas they would probably need to invest more effort to probably get up to that genetic capacity. But who knows? Are we going to be one day discovering that? Well, according to the Quran, lets us get that inference that we were created شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا, but gives us somewhere within along these lines that, we as human beings, we may think that one group is superior, and we may create certain standards and basically make ourselves as superior or appear superior in some way because of certain things. And then we can create a lie and say we are smarter, we are more beautiful, we are basically having the best features, etc. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, even though it might be that certain features may be stronger in one group of people than another genetically, but inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The race should be based on living the principle of the Lord Almighty. And remember that hadith al-Mundhir ibn al-Ashaj ibn Qais, when the Prophet ﷺ told him that he had two different characteristics that Allah and His Messenger love, and he said, what are they? And he said, forbearance and gentleness, al-hilmu wal-ana. And al-ana is basically being gentle, not rushing things. It's basically, and that's that wisdom right there. It carries within it that wisdom. Okay. And forbearance is not rushing in retaliation, but giving time. Al-hilm is also not rushing in retaliation or not rushing in your emotional response, but you're letting yourself study the circumstance instead of rushing the emotional response or being impulsive, but you're actually being gentle. You're being a person of wisdom that gives the time to study the circumstance, that gives the time to basically live up to that potential of gentleness in not rushing change. Okay. And when he asked, well, are they disciplines that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put in me, or was I the one to discipline myself into them? And he said, they're actually بَلْ جَبَلَكَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمَا. They're things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in you, giving us the inference that certain traits are actually part of your DNA. This is not just talking about, let's say, appearance in trait, or appearance in our appearance, but this is also including certain behaviors. So certain behaviors, chances are, if, for example, your family or your parents come from a smart family, chances are, if have parents that are, let's say, PhD holders or college graduates, chances are you are going to be a college graduate. If the other way, you may not necessarily make it, and then the challenge basically grows stronger. Now, you would have to basically balance and challenge this basically this challenge that perhaps your parents did not necessarily live up to. So therefore, you have a new effort to create. You have a new challenge to put in, etc. Now, at the end of the day, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know that it's not at all at a certain characteristic in your gene, or perhaps maybe a certain power or whatever it is. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. What matters the most is really you living up to the principles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not necessarily in what you would invest in this world of competition. Okay, the real competition is taqwa. The real competition is when you live the principle of the Lord Almighty, and that is whether it includes male, female, or whether that was different nations or different tribes, but lita'arafu is a key thing. You would learn from one another. That acquaintance that you would get from tribes and nations and male, female, you would learn certain things, and you would basically use that as a way to exchange knowledge, to exchange capacities, to basically help one another overcome challenges, and basically live up to al-khilafa level, which is basically bringing in, we talked about al-khilafa before, so we're not going to get into that again. Okay, so how do we live up to that? What are we supposed to be doing? قُلْ أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ. Obey Allah and His Messenger. And if they turn away, فَإِنَّمَا عَلَيْهِ مَا حُمِّلَ وَعَلَيْكُمْ مَا حُمِّلْتُمْ. For the Prophet was basically having the responsibility of delivering the message. He was basically having a certain responsibility, which is to just give you the message. And at the end of the day, is that you have the responsibility to apply it. وَعَلَيْكُمْ مَا حُمِّلْتُمْ وَإِن تُطِيعُوهُ تَهْتَدُوا. How do I get to guidance? وَإِن تُطِيعُوهُ تَهْتَدُوا. You want to get to guidance? Well, you got to put your feet, you got to put those steps, and you got to put that commitment to finding guidance. How do I find guidance? You have to put in that commitment to putting it into practice. Well, wait a minute. How are you saying so? In order for me to find guidance, I have to basically find guidance and live guidance? Okay, it's two things. Number one, Islam had given you a number of different tips in the orders, in the don'ts, in the optional, in basically, think of it as going forward, recognizing that area, taking a right, taking a left, not going back, taking a step back, etc. All of that. We think of it as halal. Basically tells you, well, it's optional. You can go whichever direction. That's absolutely fine. Obligatory means you got to move forward. There's no going back. You got to move forward. You have to apply that in your life. Haram means take a step back. This is taking you in the wrong place. Major sin would mean, boom, you're falling, a major fall right there. This is a dead end. When we're speaking about perhaps makruh, this is a red flag area. Be careful. It's a very slippery slope right there. You gotta take your steps back and find a different route. So this is where Islam tells you, in تُطِيعُوهُ تَهْتَدُوا. You basically take those orders. ما أمرتكم به فأتوا منه ما استطعتم وما نهيتكم عنه فانتهوا. What I ordered you to do, do as much as you can. But what I ordered you to abstain from, then leave instantly. What is that supposed to let us know? Well, that's supposed to let us know that you leave and you abstain from sin. It's basically not an option, but you have to abstain, period. You have to leave, period. If oppressing others, if mocking others, bullying others, if drinking, going into haram websites, all these different things, that's haram thing. Do not go into that road, because if you get into that road, trust me, it's going to affect you mentally, it's going to affect you spiritually, it's going to affect you in all the different ways, and therefore, without you realizing, you're actually going against your own cause and going against your interests. So, how do I find guidance? Well, you put in the amount of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and little by little, it's going to open the heart and going to open the mind and going to open your spirit into getting farther and farther. You put in the training of praying, you put in the training of fasting, you put in the training of abstaining from haram. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. The amount of effort that you put in, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا. They put in one jihad, لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. We would guide them to our path. What does it mean? Open the doors of guidance, open the doors of basically the path of guidance, and therefore letting us know وَإِن تُطِيعُوهُ تَهْتَدُوا. You basically live in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you shall find guidance. وَمَا عَلَى الرَّسُولِ إِلَّا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينُ. The Prophet's duty was only to deliver the message and make it clear for you. And at the end of the day, وَعَلَى اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنكُمْ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ لَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised those that would, one, amanu, that would live the faith from you and do what is righteous. لَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. I want to look at this one. What is لَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ? لَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ. First, the root is خَلَفَ. The root خَلَفَ means to have something come after. لَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُمْ. This ya right there actually means a continuous process. لَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُم. The sin and the ta is basically to let us know that there would be this path, there would be this selection. Okay, and لَيَسْتَخْلِفَنَّهُم, that noon right there is to give us that affirmation. Okay, now each and every single one in that Lugha Arabiya is key for us to keep in mind, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and this lam right there, along with that that noon right there, is to give us a double confirmation, an affirmation, and let us know that at one point, certainly we weren't necessarily the ones in power, not necessarily the ones to be considered as the upper hand, not necessarily the ones to be in let's say in the position of control or power, or position of a position of being at least superior in bring in a certain force. And that's why the ayah says, well, in order for you to be in power, are we supposed to even seek to be in power? Absolutely. But I thought that that was terror. You were indoctrinated to think that a Jew or a liberal or an atheist, that they were the only ones that were fit to be in power, because they can be the only ones to be living up to the definition of human rights. And that as a Muslim, the second you say that you would admire to be in power, you were indoctrinated to think that if a Muslim were to say that they had the audacity to say that they want to be in power, therefore terror in disguise. And we were indoctrinated to think that way. We were indoctrinated to even doubt our own values, that within them contains some form of terror, some form of lacking justice and lacking human rights, and we were indoctrinated to think that way. The same thing that people used to think that Israel has the right to exist, and therefore you should not doubt it. You shouldn't doubt it. Right now, people are having the audacity and having the power and having basically the strength and the courage to say, well, wait a minute, who said that we have to necessarily support that, and that it was something that we were told that we have to live to see that this was nothing but a fact. And certainly right now, with all this awareness and what happened to, of course, the place of Gaza, then things came into question whether that is true or not, and how did we get indoctrinated into that? So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised those that would be in faith and promised those that would live up to the principles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they would be in power. They would be in power, like in control, like in political power, political, military, and all the different kinds, and even educational power. You mean there would be, that's what we're asked to do and what we're asked to strive? Yes, we're asked to strive to be basically the ones that would live up to justice and that would implement justice on not only our area in our personal individual life, but including a universal strive that this is كما استخلف الذين من قبلهم. And in the same way that we had different nations, whether استخلف الذين من قبلهم during the time of Sahaba, or whether during the time of perhaps maybe Bani Israel, or probably Prophet Nuh, or Prophet did different prophets, just the same way, it's a certain pattern, but you have to live up to the principle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, that's not, I mean, only on a government level, but that's also true even on an individual level. On an individual level, if you wanted to strive, if you wanted to live at a certain power, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling you, hold on to the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do not let shaitan convince you or manipulate you the way that he manipulated Adam alayhi salam. What did he manipulate him into? He said, أَوَلَا أَدُلُّكَ عَلَى شَجَرَةِ الْخُلْدِ وَمُلْكٍ لَا يَبْلَى. He told him, should I not show you off to a tree that is the tree of eternity? He changed the name and he gave it a new name. A tree of eternity, he called it. وَمُلْكٍ لَا يَبْلَى. And it's a power that basically is manifest. It is basically a power over everything. It would never wear off. It would always be present. It would be prevalent. It would be beyond all. And then Prophet Adam alayhi salam, what did he do? Well, basically, he had not the word that was used was that he had forgotten. Well, the word nasiya does not necessarily mean that he had really forgotten, to mean that it didn't occur to him, but the word nasiya can mean disregard. Living a moment of not having that awareness come to his heart. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَنَسِيَ وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا. This is key. فَنَسِيَ وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا. The ayah says, what does it mean, فَنَسِيَ وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا? He had forgotten. We did not find azma, determination there. What does that mean? And why was the focus on Adam and not Hawa? The focus on Adam was letting us know that there is a certain responsibility on men in leadership that women were not asked to do. And that's why, although the ayah basically did say in other ayat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala فَأَكَلَا مِنْهَا, they both ate from it, telling us and giving us the inference that both were responsible, but he had given more responsibility onto Adam and more accountability onto Adam than Hawa because of the position of leadership that he is capable of carrying. And that's one thing about manhood, that you basically have a bigger responsibility compared to your sister. Boy, and the boys, you've got a bigger responsibility because you're going to be the leaders, you're going to be the men. So therefore, you have to live up to a certain potential that the girls, yes, we'll ask them to live to a different potential, but your potential is to be in a position of leadership. How do we become leaders? The one thing is when he said, وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا. That azima, creating that azima, that determination, creating that power, creating that stubbornness. It's part of it. It's one of the factors of it. If you have a stubborn child, congratulations. You have a stubborn child, congratulations. Because if they are stubborn, that means they have the mindset. That means they have the mindset to basically have the foundation of that azima. If your children have that determination that when they want to do something, they're really determined to do it. They're really determined to finish it. Well, that is a key thing that not everyone has. وَلَمْ نَجِدْ لَهُ عَزْمًا. In other words, it is part of our discipline to teach our boys, to teach our men, and to have men that have al-azima. What is that azima? Al-azima is that determination, is that stubbornness, is that commitment. And when you look at كما استخلف الذين من قبلهم ولا يمكنن لهم دينهم الذي ارتضى لهم. In order to get that level of leadership, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says ولا يمكنن. What is it, tamkeen? Just like in English when we say mechanism, okay, a tamkeen is that you would have the grip, you would have the control of over the different mechanisms. That's a tamkeen. A tamkeen is also in raising our boys and raising our daughters and raising our children. We got to let them learn how to do a number of different tasks. Yes, learn how to do plumbing, learn how to cook, learn how to do dishes, learn how to wash laundry, learn how to work on your homework, learn how to support your brother. Learn how to support your sister. Learn how to teach your daughter how to become a mother. Learn how to teach your son to become a man and to basically be not afraid and be responsible and be in those positions. That's لا يمكنن. Those are at least in an elementary level. In an advanced secondary level, لا يمكنن لهم دينهم الذي ارتضى لهم, that they would be capable of learning how to live that commitment to making Islam basically be in power, whether we're speaking about political power, military and economy, or probably an educational level, etc. All of these, that's tamkeen. وَلَيُبَدِّلَنَّهُم مِّن بَعْدِ خَوْفِهِمْ أَمْنًا. And then the Lord Almighty would replace the fear into security, into feeling secure, into feeling safe, into feeling all of that. Why is that key? Well, that's key because not until we get this training of how to overcome fears, how to overcome the different weaknesses and get that tamkin, and how to get into that istikhlaf, how to live up to al-khilafah, and how do we live up to all of that? It's basically founded الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنكُمْ وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. All of that. If we don't have that, male or female, then what we're going to be getting is that, well, if there's no iman, then there's going to be khawf. If there's no iman, then there's going to be khawf. Of course, if you don't have faith, then you're going to be afraid. What if poverty comes in? What if somebody overcomes? What if? But al-mu'min knows no fear. So we're relating the one on top to the one right there. Why? Because a mu'min recognizes that whatever I fail in, I recognize that true success comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gives that potential to move on. I just have to put in the step to basically walk it. That's why إِن تُطِيعُوهُ تَهْتَدُوا. I have to put in the step to walk it in order to get to the final step. And وَلَا يُمَكِّنَ لَهُمْ دِينَهُمُ الَّذِي ارْتَضَى لَهُمْ وَلَا يُبَدِّلَنَّهُم مِّن بَعْدِ خَوْفِهِمْ أَمْنًا يَعْبُدُونَنِي لَا يُشْرِكُونَ بِي شَيْئًا. In other words, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how do we live up to that? أَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ آتُوا الزَّكَاةَ أَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. Okay, now when we're looking at those areas, the question that comes in, well, what is the definition of living principle for male and female, both of us? واعلموا أن فيكم رسول الله لو يطيعكم في كثير من الأمر لعنتم ولكن الله حبب إليكم الإيمان وزينه في قلوبكم وكره إليكم الكفر والفسوق والعصيان أولئك هم الراشدون. What does it mean to live the principle? What does it mean to be a person of rushd, a person of maturity, a person of high standard, of that maturity, or that level of principle? He said, well, no, the Prophet ﷺ is amongst you. In other words, you had the Sunnah, the Quran was revealed onto you. Now you were reading it, but then know that the Prophet ﷺ was amongst you and is basically letting you learn the practice in how to implement that Quran into practice. So if he was going to succumb to your matters on what you had thought was right, لعنتم. And this is key. You may want something, but not just because you want it, it doesn't make it right for you. You might want to say, well, I want to go to this university. I want to get this job. Just because you want it, it doesn't make it right for you. And that's why the ayah says, لو يطيعكم في كثير من الأمر لعنتم. If he was going to obey you in a lot of the different matters that you probably had wanted, that you probably had aimed to, لعنتم. What is العناء? Ilana is hardship. In other words, the consequences may be devastating without you knowing. Just because you want something, and this is something that we always need to teach our children as well. I know you want to go to this university. I know you want to go to probably this country. I know you probably want to go there and there, and you are basically you're basically feeling that, you know what, if I only go there, that's the key to my success. That's the key to my success in dunya and akhirah. This is the key to my happiness. But of course, the Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was letting us know that if he was going to succumb to your wishes or succumb to what you thought was the best thing, it was just going to bring in a result of hardship that was just delayed. And that's one thing, is that when we're looking at, and of course, certainly the Prophet ﷺ, our parents are not necessarily prophets, but cherish their experience. Cherishing their experience to help you basically not fall in a lot of those mistakes that others had fallen into. لعنتم, not because you want it. It doesn't make it necessarily right for you. لعنتم ولكن الله حبب إليكم الإيمان وزينه في قلوبكم وكره إليكم الكفر والفسوق والعصيان. But the Lord Almighty had made faith lovable to you. What does that mean? Well, that's basically meaning that the foundation of maturity, the foundation of what you want to seek in a husband, what you want to seek in raising your children, is let them love faith. Let them recognize that this is what will give you security. You bond to it because it is best for you, because you love it, because it's your identity, because your identity is basically the identity of Iman. وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ, and made it beautiful in your heart, and you enjoy it, you adore it. When she's wearing hijab, certainly it's hot, but she basically embraces it, zayyanahu, because she feels that the beauty of my identity as a mu'minah is more important to me than the identity of a fasiqah, or perhaps getting some social acceptance or someone to see me as attractive. I would want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to basically see me, Allahu yajtabi ilayhi man yasha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala see me as the one to be fit, the one to be selected, the one to basically live up to that ground, or up to basically Jannah. زينه في قلوبكم وكره إليكم الكفر والفسوق والعصيان, and made detestable or basically hated upon you al-kufr, al-fusuq. Al-kufr is basically disbelief. Al-fusuq is basically major sin. And al-isyan is minor sin, or al-fusuq is public sin. And al-isyan is hidden sin. When you're alone, no one can see what you're doing. And then only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can see you. Are you committing? Are you committing basically that? Are you committed to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked you to do? Or are you taking advantage? No one else can see me, and my parents are not there. No one is there to basically hold me accountable. I can delete the history and no one would know. I can basically, probably find a VPN and basically find a way to go around all of this. And then, of course, well, that basically goes in opposition of Iman. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us know that these people that are committed to Iman, that's beautiful in their hearts, mashallah, and كره إليكم الكفر والفسوق والعصيان, and made al-kufr hated to you, al-fusuq and al-isyan hated to you, أولئك هم الراشدون. Those are the ones that are rashidun, and that's basically the best فضلا من الله ونعمة. That's the best blessing that you can get. Wallahu alimun hakim. Now, so what makes manhood? So you talked about all of those. That's basically for men and women. How is a man different? So that's where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us know certain words in the Quran were directed at boys. And certain words were directed at girls. And that's what we want to do. We want to scrutinize the words that were directed at boys in the context of boys compared to the context of girls, and actually see these variants. So let's say, in the context of boy, he said basically, أَكَفَرْتَ بِالَّذِي خَلَقَكَ مِن تُرَابٍ ثُمَّ مِن نُطْفَةٍ ثُمَّ سَوَّاكَ. Here's the word, رَجُلًا. Would you deny the one that created you from dust, then made you into nutfa, into basically and nutfa is basically the fertilized egg. In other words, that the beginning of the beginning of the creation of human beings in the mother's womb. ثم سواك رجلا, and made you into a man. So in other words, recognizing your own self and living up to al-iman is the first thing that what makes manhood. The first thing, recognizing your identity as a mu'min. Because if you are not living il-iman, then the chances are that you are going to be confused about what identity to carry. What identity to carry, what to live up to, and then you're going to be putting in your own interests. Your own interest, your own selfishness as basically the centricity. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was letting us know that what makes manhood is to recognize that the center belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the center, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically the one that is superior. For you, don't consider yourself superior somehow because you are a man, or you are necessarily having that muscle mass, etc. You're not superior just because you're a man. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us know in Surah Al-Kahf, which is in the heart of the Quran, أَكَفَرْتَ بِالَّذِي خَلَقَكَ. Are you going to basically commit kufr? Are you going? And kufr is in two different ways. There's the kufr in denying Allah, and there's the kufr in practice in denying the principles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not living up to them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lets us know that to live as a man is to first recognize your key identity as a mu'min, as a believer in Allah. Because the second that person is not a mu'min, guess what? His centricity is going to be وَأُحْضِرَتِ الْأَنفُسُ الشُّحَّ. His centricity is going to be, just like in the boys' world, it's all about a certain territory. You get into my area of territory, you go to my room without asking, you do this, I'm gonna fight to the end. Oh, that's not living. أَكَفَرْتَ بِالَّذِي خَلَقَكَ. It's not a big deal. But of course, because in the boys' world, just like you would say, for example, certain birds, certain animals, certain dogs, etc., they would basically, of course, sign a certain territory and let other people know their territory by letting others basically, whether it's through where they would be living and use the second you step within their territory, they're ready there, are ready there to attack. Okay, so, but who's going to attack? Well, we've got certain things that we share with animals, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا مِن دَابَّةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا طَائِرٍ يَطِيرُ بِجَنَاحَيْهِ إِلَّا أُمَمٌ أَمْثَالُكُم. You share certain things with birds, you share certain things with animals that you feel it's my territory, and then certainly, usually it's the female that basically they're fighting over. It's a certain female, and basically the foundation is the home. That's your territory. The home is your territory. That home is your territory. But then the other description of what really identifies your identity is al-Iman. Let's say, قال الله تعالى وما أرسلنا من قبلك إلا رجالا نوحي إليهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also said, and we had only sent before you رجالا نوحي إليهم. Here's another word of رجال. We had only sent men that we had given the scripture, that we had given the revelation to men. Why men? To basically receive the scripture and the revelation, because men were given certain features of basically being leaders, etc. But really, he didn't say dhukuran, he said that rijalan. But in other instances, he was basically letting us know that just because a person is a dhakar, just because a person basically has male features of biological male features, it doesn't make him a rajul. Because الرجال is in the Quran always in the presentation of a good connotation, of a connotation of leadership, a connotation of power, a connotation of commitment, a connotation of an identity. And that's why he said, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن قَبْلِكَ إِلَّا رِجَالًا نُوحِي إِلَيْهِمْ. Those men that basically were living up to the legacy of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent. So that's the basis of manhood, that they would live up to the legacy. And what is the basis of manhood in a number of different ayat? Number one, recognizes the principle and its basis. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ رِجَالٌ صَدَقُوا مَا عَاهَدُوا اللَّهَ عَلَيْهِ. What did he say? Use the word rijal again. They're man. من المؤمنين, from believing men. They are rijal. The connotation of leadership, the connotation of commitment, the connotation of power. Again, the word rijal. What is that supposed to entail? Sadaqu. They're honest. When people lie, they usually lie because they're afraid. They're afraid of the consequence. So what would they do? They would basically lie. Did you do this? No, I didn't. But they know they did it. But they're afraid of the consequence. So they would be lying. The second that they are being liars is that same second that they're actually cowards. Okay? The same second, they're cowards. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is letting us know, صَدَقُوا مَا عَاهَدُوا اللَّهَ عَلَيْهِ. The first thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had described men, and at least those men that would live up to this level of manhood, and therefore they deserve to be called man. He said, صَدَقُوا. They were honest to living مَا عَاهَدُوا اللَّهَ عَلَيْهِ. What they had promised, and what they had what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had taken upon them to live ma'ahadullah, to live up to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had taken upon them, that principle. So what would they be? They would be a person on a mission. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had said, وَمَا أَرْسَلَ مِن قَبْلِكَ إِلَّا رِجَالًا نُوحِي إِلَيْهِ. A person on a mission, a legacy. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had also said, يُسَبِّحُ لَهُ فِيهَا بِالْغُدُوِّ وَالْأَصَالِ رِجَالٌ لَا تُلْهِيهِمْ. Here's the word again. رِجَالٌ لَا تُلْهِيهِمْ تِجَارَةٌ وَلَا بَيْعٌ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَإِقَامِ الصَّلَاةِ وَإِيتَاءِ الزَّكَاةِ يَخَافُونَ يَوْمًا تَتَقَلَّبُ فِيهِ الْقُلُوبُ وَالْأَبْصَارُ. Let's look at this one. What would these men do? In that same surah, in Surah An-Nur, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يُسَبِّحُ لَهُ فِيهَا بِالْغُدُوِّ وَالْأَصَالِ. Where would we find these men? where would we find them? You would say, well, they would be in the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you were to go to Surah An-Nur, in Surah An-Nur, after telling us about the man, and then he would say, well, you would find them basically in the masajid. What would they be doing? يسبح له فيها بالغدو والآصال رجال لا تلهيهم تجارة ولا بيع عن ذكر الله. They're basically doing that tasbih. They're committed to the dhikr. Their words are speaking of dhikr. Their actions are speaking of their صدقوا ما عاهدوا الله عليه. That's the action. And in terms of mindset, their mindset is basically رجال لا تلهيهم تجارة. They're men, no tijara, no business, no game, no bay', no transaction, any type of entertainment. تلهيهم عن ذكر الله would pacify them away from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and performing their prayer on time and being committed to it and giving zakah. Why? Because يخافون يوما تتقلب فيه القلوب والأبصار. Why would they be committed? Because of they're afraid to lose points? Because they're afraid they might lose money? Because no. Or they want to probably appear religious in order to get more followers, or probably get more people to donating for them, or what? No. يخافون يوما تتقلب فيه القلوب والأبصار. They recognize that the true fear and the true thing that they would be afraid of is that day when the hearts would tremble of fear. The hearts would tremble of fear, and the eyes would have, you could see in their eyes the fear of the consequence of what they had done. They're afraid of that day. They're not afraid of death, but they're afraid of that judgment day when they would be accountable. So what would they do? They would rush, they would scurry to go to the masjid, they would rush to be committed to the principle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically said, الرجال قوامون على النساء, when he talked about رجال قوامون على النساء, ended that ayah with saying, yes, I do give you the permission to basically put women on a certain structure, to basically do this. Ladies, this is what I want you to do. But then he said, it's enough for me, for true believing men, to say, فَإِنْ أَطَعْنَكُمْ فَلَا تَبْغُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ سَبِيلًا. If they obey you, then do not transgress the limit of their obedience. فَلَا تَبْغُوا عَلَيْهِنَّ سَبِيلًا. Why? Because إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيًّا كَبِيرًا. That's why if you want to choose a husband, if he's not a man that is really living up to رِجَالُ لَا تُلْهِهِمْ تِجَارَةٌ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ رِجَالٌ صَدَقُوا مَا عَاهَدُوا اللَّهَ عَلَيْهِ, they're not living up to that legacy, you don't want this man. Appearance, just because someone has the money, remember, just by having the money, it doesn't make you hospitable. It doesn't make you generous. Generosity is a mindset. It's not money. It's a mindset. Giving is a mindset. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had praised the mu'mineen in al-Ansar when he said, وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. They would share even if they were extremely hungry. يؤثرون على أنفسهم ولو كان بهم خصاصة. Even if they were so hungry, even if they were struggling with poverty, but they would basically give one another, even if they wanted the whole thing, but they would share, they would give. And that's one key thing, is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيًّا كَبِيرًا, when he talked about رِجَالُ قَوْمٌ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ, إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيًّا كَبِيرًا, should be enough to let that man, if he really is living the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to make his heart tremble. عَلِيًّا كَبِيرًا is a threat. And that's the same thing. يَخَافُونَ يَوْمًا تَتَقَلَّبُ فِيهِ الْقُلُوبُ وَالْأَبْصَارُ. They recognize that this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is warning them, that is threatening them. And they recognize that if they don't commit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there's going to come a day where this is really going to happen. Just like the Prophet ﷺ had told Adi ibn Hatim, he said, you will stand before Allah. لَيْسَ بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَ اللَّهِ تُرْجُمَانٍ. There's no going to be any interpreter between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's something that is for sure, that you will stand in before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is رِجَالٌ لَا تُلْهِهِمْ تِجَارَةٌ وَلَا بَيْعٌ عَنْ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. Nothing will pacify them away from living the commitment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what is manhood? They're guided by the principle, mind, and not emotion, and not impulsiveness. Yes, they're angry. Yes, they're probably triggered. Yes, they're probably provoked. Yes, their wife might have said a word that probably they considered that harmed their masculinity, but they're living up to the word of that principle. What is it? لَمَسْجِدٌ أُسِّسَ عَلَى التَّقْوَى. The masjid that was based on taqwa is basically where you should be in. It's not just the masjid, but it's also the home. It's also the heart. Why? Because فيه رجال يحبون أن يتطهروا والله يحب المطهرين. Because there are men that love to stay pure, that love to stay away from najasa, and teach your sons how to not urinate in the wrong way, how not to basically not take hygiene as a place of consideration, because if you don't take your hygiene as in place of hygiene, as in your true identity, then if you are not a person of hygiene, the Prophet ﷺ had taught us that hygiene is one of these key things to basically bring purity and purification in the heart as well. Hygiene physically, hygiene basically on your clothes, hygiene in the space that you're in, hygiene in the spaces that you're using, whether it's a public bathroom or whether it's a public space or whether it's you're walking down the street. Maintaining that hygiene, maintaining your mindset to be clean. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised them and He said, فِيهِ رِجَالٌ يُحِبُّونَ أَن يَتَطَهَّرُوا. There are men that love to be committed to hygiene and cleansing and bodily cleansing and self-cleansing and all of that. وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُطَّهِّرِينَ. And the Lord Almighty loves those who are mutahhirin. So what is the basis of manhood? They face challenges, not surrender to them. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about that man. Didn't tell us the name. وَجَاءَ رَجُلٌ مِّنْ أَقْصَى الْمَدِينَةِ وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلون. In another ayah, وجاء رجل من أقصى المدينة يسعى in Surah Yasin. وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل. A man came. He described him as a man. قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين. Was there a challenge? Yes. Was there a consequence? Yes. What was the consequence in this dunya? The consequence, basically, this man was going to be probably imprisoned, probably maybe killed, who knows what. Of course, these people might actually see that he was opposing their lifestyle, but then he didn't care. اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. Who should we follow? He said, اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا. Follow those people that don't wait for any pay. They're basically those mu'mineen, those anbiya, and they themselves are guided. And that's why in another ayah, وَمَا لِيَ لَا أَعْبُدُ الَّذِي فَطَرَنِي وَإِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ. Why would I not follow the one that created me, and our return is to Him? So therefore, what it means to be a man is that they face the challenges, not surrender that to them. And that's why He said, وَجَاءَ مِنْ أَقْصَى الْمَدِينَةِ رَجُلٌ قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اتَّبِعُوا الْمُرْسَلِينَ. He was telling them, despite the challenge, despite the consequence, He's going to face them. He's going to basically go directly at them. Looks for solutions, not excuses. That's why looks for solutions as another feature of manhood. قال رجلان من الذين يخافون أنعم الله عليهم ادخلوا عليهم الباب فإذا دخلتموه فإنكم غالبون. What was it? Well, they basically, the other Bani Israel, they basically thought, well, I mean, the Palestinians, they're basically mighty men. They're basically qawm jabbarin. We're not going to go to fight them. But then, of course, Bani Israel were afraid, and they were always looking for different ways to not be committed. So, قال رجلان, two men, من الذين يخافون, those that basically, are they afraid? They're afraid, but أنعم الله عليهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them. Was there fear? There was fear, but they looked for a solution and not an excuse. ادخلوا عليهم الباب. We can just enter that door. فإذا دخلتموه فإنكم غالبون. If you enter that door, that entrance, perhaps it's a route or something, وعلى الله فتوكلوا إن كنتم مؤمنين. And just depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just keep going. Don't stop. What are they looking for? They're looking for a solution, not an excuse. Just keep going. Putting that commitment, even if you fail once, just depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is their mindset based on? A mindset of a man recognizes not to surrender to challenges, but looks for solutions, not excuses, and is confident and not dependent. So قال رجلان من الذين يخافون أنعم الله عليهم ادخلوا عليهم الباب. They basically were confident. Why? Because they're confident in Allah Almighty. And فتوكلوا إن كنتم مؤمنين. Depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you really are true believers. And that's why when they're confident and not dependent, that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمِنْهُمْ مَن يَنْتَظِرُ وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. They would not change. They would not change their commitment to the principle because perhaps maybe a challenge was there, or perhaps maybe there was an offer of probably more dunya, but they would وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. They would live committed because that's what it means to be a man. وَمَا بَدَّلُوا تَبْدِيلًا. They don't change. They don't continuously change. No, they live up to the principle regardless of the challenge. They live up to Islam regardless of offers given to them. They live up to the principles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regardless of any perhaps maybe offers. Why? Because man considers his places right, because that's what builds his morals, that's what builds his manners. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah At-Tawbah, وَالَّذِينَ اتَّخَذُوا مَسْجِدًا ضِرَارًا وَكُفْرًا وَتَفْرِيقًا بَيْنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَإِرْصَادًا لِمَنْ حَارَبَ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَلَا يَحْلِفُنَّ إِنْ أَرَدْنَا إِلَّا الْحُسْنَى. You're going to get a lot of people that will say, well, what we mean is just a good thing. And this is basically talk about Masjid Dirar. What is the story of Masjid Dirar? Masjid Dirar. Masjid Dirar was a masjid that was built by the munafiqeen. And they basically built a masjid. But they didn't build a casino, they built a masjid. Okay? And what their intention to building this masjid, they basically wanted to build something that would divide the ummah. They weren't going to build a casino because that was an obvious aberration. So what would they build? They would build a masjid. And that way we can be selective. This person is attending that masjid, that person is attending that masjid. And then since we built it, then what we can do is lay out the different bylaws, the different policies. We can lay out certain things and we can decide a number of different things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called it Masjid Dirar, in order that it would get demolished. Why? Because its main goal was to create division within the ummah, and it was basically to create a place of intelligence in order to get inside the ummah, and in order to create that division. And even though they would come in, وَلَا يَحْلِفُنَّ إِنْ أَرَدْنَا إِلَّا الْحُسْنَى. We came in with a good intention. Why are you doubting our intention? Why are you being here judgmental? Don't be judgmental. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاللَّهُ يَشْهَدُ إِنَّهُمْ لَكَاذِبُونَ. He witnesses that they are nothing but liars. They're actually coming in with an intention to create division. So, لَا تَقُمْ فِيهِ أَبَدًا. Never pray in there whatsoever. لَمَسْجِدٌ أُسِّسَ عَلَى التَّقْوَى مِنْ أَوَّلِ يَوْمٍ أَحَقُّ أَن تَقُومَ فِيهِ. A masjid that was built on a foundation of commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, religious integrity is basically your priority from the first day, to actually stand in it, to be committed to that prayer there. Why? فِيهِ رِجَالُ يُحِبُّونَ أَن يَتَطَهَّرُوا. There are men that seek and take hygiene as a commitment, as an identity. وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُطَّهِّرِينَ. أَفَمَنْ أَسَّسَ بُنْيَانَهُ عَلَى تَقْوَى مِنَ اللَّهِ وَرِضْوَانٍ. Are those that would build their, whether it's a monument or whether it's a masjid or whether it's a home or whether we take it, of course, within this ayah, this bunyan is basically talking about the masjid. But it would also mean the inference what is the foundation within your home? What is the foundation when you got married? What is the basis that you really were seeking? If it's based on taqwa min Allah wa ridwan, then move forward. What is taqwa min Allah? Taqwa min Allah is basically that it's founded on the principles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ridwan, that you're seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be the one that is content over you. خير أمن أسس بنيانه على شفا جرف هار فانهار به في نار جهنم. Which is better? Somebody that would build their foundations basically on a loose gravel, on a loose area, on an area, shafa jurufin. It's basically on an area that is a steep area, and any minute it would basically just on a loose gravel, any minute it would basically go into that incline and just fall. فَانْهَارَ بِهِ فِي نَارِ جَهَنَّمَ. Why is it a loose or an area that's like an incline and that it would basically fall? Because it's not on a foundation. وَاللَّهُ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الظَّالِمِينَ. It's not on a foundation of taqwa. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not guide those that would transgress the limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why the Prophet ﷺ praised the men and basically praised the boy, and he said, شَابٌ نَشَأَ فِي عِبَادَةِ اللَّهِ. It's basically this man that grew up from early childhood to be on ibadatillah. They would learn how to be committed, they would learn how to be strong, they would learn how to be strong in their deen, and that's why their priority would be to support Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Masajid are their centers. They seek purification in heart, body, and mind. They recognize that building their homes on piety and the Lord's principle is basically their priority. And to be a man is to be committed. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talked about this, talked about committed to dhikr as one discipline to basically help them train themselves in words. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically lets us know that even the kafir will recognize whether you are a person of principle or not. And that's why Prophet Shu'aib alayhi salam, when he was basically letting them, was trying to give da'wah to them, he said, أَلَيْسَ مِنْكُمْ رَجُلٌ رَشِيدٌ. Isn't there a man that is Rashid, a man with maturity to recognize that this is all wrong? And the kafirs themselves, when during the time of Prophet Lut alayhi salam, what did they say? They basically said, أَخْرِجُوهُم مِّن قَرْيَتِكُمْ. You got to get these people out. Why? Because they're seeking tahara. Their wrong behavior was basically letting them see that being on Islam and being committed to the deen was disgusting. And therefore, just letting us know that being a man is basically being serious and on a mission. I'm not going to go over all these slides right now. So, inshallah, on the day after tomorrow, we'll continue these slides. So for now, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, inshallah. Okay. So if there are any questions, inshallah, go ahead, my friends. Okay, let's see in the chat right there. What days are these classes and what time? So we are, well, this day, so it's basically this time of the day, well, not this time, at 2 hours from now. That's your Friday, my Saturday, and the day after tomorrow, which is your Sunday, my Monday. Okay, this is basically that this is fiqh of marriage. So this is just a part of fiqh of marriage, and tafsir is basically on the rest of the days. So every single day, 2 hours from now, we go live on YouTube, and we basically would be on Zoom right there, and alhamdulillah.